Hello, and welcome back to Video Games. Tim Rogers here with issue number 360 of the Insert Credit Audio magazine. Wow, I wrote a script. I wrote this script sporadically between March 29th, 2021 and October 17th, 2024. I promisingly intend to recite directly from this script for the remainder of this presentation, with, in the twin interests of my time and your excellence, zero detours, deviations, alterations, substitutions, improvisations, or redos. Except when in accordance to a rule I intend to reveal shortly. You who listen or view, please do so secure in the guarantee that what you listen to and/or view occurred during one unbroken recording take. Actually, let's allow one improvisation. Note to future me, please improvise for one sentence. I bought this Mountain Dew downstairs because it says Xbox on it, and I thought maybe if I hold it like this sometimes during this recording, maybe that looks cool or thematically appropriate. Now that we have dispensed with all spontaneity for the remainder of the program, let us complete our disclaimer. Though I promise not to improvise or deviate, I may at times, during this recording, stumble or scoff or laugh or perhaps lol or, by some chance, LMAO at this script as I attempt straight-facedly to read it aloud, because I have not looked at most of its contents in over 3 years. Feel free to keep score of my breaks. Also, either or both of my dogs might begin barking during the recording of this presentation. Most of the time they bark merely to enjoy the raw sensation of making noise. Therefore, I intend to ignore them until they become quiet. Do not worry. I have ignored them before, and they do not mind. I have walked them twice already today, and they have eaten lunch. Finally, I must make note that I wrote the entirety of this script under a particular ultra-strict grammatic rule, except for 12 sentences. I laid these trick sentences as both engagement-guaranteeing devices and traps for my future self, who must thus on his toesedly read far enough ahead to repair and rework the problem sentences into rule-conforming editions of themselves, or face round internal ridicule for the rest of his life. Furthermore, he must do this in real time to avoid breaking the audience's all-holy immersion. I invite the audience to guess the nature of the rule itself, and also to guess from any cracks in the presenter's entranced facade which 12 sentences required repair. Oh yes, future self, you decided a long time ago that you wanted to do this. Let's find out how much you meant it. Disclaimers thus disclaimed, let us begin with an introduction. Frequent tuners into this show safely expect a group discussion in which one host guides 3 panelists through 10 topics lasting 6 minutes each. So by default, this show's very design has in it a 3, a 0, and a 6. I point this out right here and now so that any stethoscope to ear cup numerology doctors amongst the listenership might heave a deep sigh at the notion of met quotas. Owing to this pristine coincidence between our show's presentation design and the perfect circular nature of today's issue number, genuinely anything I do here and today fits the format, so long as whatever I do lasts longer than 1 hour. Luckily for any poetry-fearers in the congregation, I arrive before you today with a simple plan for normal-type pure entertainment content. Today, I wish to present to you 36 essential video games for Xbox 360. I present them in roughly ranked order, with some exceptions there and here for gentle measure. And I present them as a deliciously pre-written script from which I, the out-loud reader, have already once promised not to deviate. Before I unfurl my selections for your inaudible-to-me scrutiny, let me speak briefly on the provenance of this list of Xbox 360 games I personally like a lot. On Monday, March 29, 2021, the website insertcredit.com posted a podcast episode ranking their favorite Xbox 360 games. Years have passed since then, during which many listeners have asked me the same series of 3 questions. Question number 1. Why did they choose only 20 games instead of some more numerologically appropriate number of games for this, the one video game console of all time with the largest somewhat workable numeral in its name? Question number 2. Why did they post this as episode number 178 instead of waiting literally 2 more episodes to post it under the far more numerologically appropriate episode number of 180? And question number 3. Why did I not appear on this episode? To the first question, I agree, and add that, yes, the notion of 68,000 best games for the Sharp X Rokuman Hassen also strikes me as ridiculous. As to the second query, you have already realized that I intend to remedy the list entry number mistake by including 36 games, which for any calculator lackers in the standing room only arena represents 360, cleanly divided by Western and Eastern mathematics' favorite base numeral, 10. Furthermore, regarding question number 2, I say that I agree, and that I have patiently awaited edition number 360 to make this atrocity right. For the final question, I can only answer that I suffered some sort of a jugular vein infection and had real bad gastritis sort of immediately after for a not fully unrelated reason, and can honestly only take about 4 sips of every big black coffee I buy ever since, before I begin complaining about how expensive coffee has become in New York. Let's not dwell too longly, however, on truths medical. Imagine, if you like, a most hypothetical of alternative scenarios. In this scenario, the host and the panelists initiated an email chain about a possible Xbox 360 ranking episode. As befits my frequent and beloved custom, I did not see the initial email of this thread until everyone attached had taken at the very least 2 whole whiffing kick opportunities at the soccer ball where I come from we call saying something reasonable. In the interest of evading accusations that I aimed merely to make one or more of the panelists sound like a buffoon, I have limited myself to direct quotation of only 0 of the thousands of words typed into this email thread. To summarize, the emergent bullet points of the others' grasp on that full circularly crucial Herculean console titan, the Xbox 360, could find eloquent rephrasing like this. First, that it lacked exclusives. Second, that everybody played Left 4 Dead on Xbox 360, so that makes Left 4 Dead basically an Xbox 360 game. I disagree with both of these notions in different ways. If we gingerly set atop the crowns of our brains the phantom hat of youth, and consider the Xbox 360 the way a Super Nintendoid might have in, say, 1994, the sketch quickly emerges that the Xbox 360 represents a true Mega Driver's kitchen. Gated perhaps by a high entry price point and the untouchable aura of all pre-Wii domination non-Nintendo video games, the Xbox 360 dragged the waning console war back onto pay-per-view. Microsoft threw money around. They had a whole mnemonic World Wrestling Federation broadcasting team's worth of hype men slinging proto-Silicon Valley-esque snake-oily terminology on MTV yard sale sets. Peter Moore promised us lucid dream-like immersion. Another Peter, this one called Molyneux, promised everyone a brand new car, a dog, and a child with cancer. A guy named Jay Allard also existed for a while. They had a perfect dark prequel available at launch. You could buy games on disc, and you could download smaller games. Owing to the fortuitous yet non-existence of the PlayStation 3, the Xbox 360 quickly assumed the lead position in the console race with the slapped-together swagger of a big toy for gaming dudes who only wanted their game makers to let the games begin and get out of the way. I spent the run-up to the Xbox 360's launch working literally at Sony Computer Entertainment Japan, sitting in on many meetings involving plans for the release of the PlayStation 3. The irony of Sony lagging in the race did not escape me. As Sony's electronics division hyped up fancy new HD TVs to the masses, only Microsoft so far had a video game console that could use more than half of those expensive pixels more than half of the time. I recognize in hindsight what I also recognized at the time in foresight. The Xbox 360 smoked the PlayStation 3 like a pack of cools. PlayStation 3 eventually had Gran Turismo and Uncharted and multiple remakeable games like The Last of Us. Though the Xbox 360 had red, sticky, filthy money all over every wall, floor, and ceiling in a tacky billion-dollar McMansion. They spent that money sometimes without rhyme, reason, or even taste. And this led to good, great, excellent times for exactly me and you. As for the notion of Left 4 Dead as an Xbox 360 game, I too played Left 4 Dead on Xbox 360. I also played Portal on there via the Orange Box. I played Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare on the Xbox 360. I played Grand Theft Auto 4, Red Dead Redemption, and L.A. Noire all on the Xbox 360. I, in my private thoughts, consider each of these games an Xbox 360 game. Given enough time, I could persuasively argue that despite its PlayStation-led marketing, because the original Red Dead Redemption runs at native 4K on the Xbox Series X, a better visual presentation, I think, than its recent remaster, and has never seen release on PC, we can legally consider Red Dead Redemption an Xbox 360 game. However, I don't want to do this, because I have more interesting games to canonize. Breaking news. On October 8, 2024, Rockstar Games unfortunately announced the upcoming release of Red Dead Redemption for PC on October 29, 2024. I had intended, 3 years ago, to write a timeless introduction. Oh well. Back to our script. These games I have chosen not only express the spirit of the Xbox 360 as I see it, they hopefully cast it in a freshish light, as a weird For Mavericks 2 sort of Sega Saturnalian Dreamcastly freak occurrence, somehow magically both the more popular console and too actually cool for its time. Around this point in a presentation such as this, I like to lay bare my rubric. Today, I elect to abstain. Yes, I chose and ranked the games according to a list of strict and hyper-specific rules. I designed these rules so as to inject maximum meaningfulness into the shape of my list, outlining for it a reason to exist alongside, or dare I say, above, this podcast's previous list. Somehow, by my rules, my beloved Fable 2 did not wind up on the list, though Caladrius did. A dog-befriending man making such a selection has nothing to lose by explaining his rationale up front, though I find more personal entertainment value in not doing so. Rather than explain these rules for you here in this quickly blimping introduction, I have opted to instead inject sketches of the edges of my rules into each game's blurb directly. You know what they say. When you don't have time to write something good, write something long. And when you lack barely even the time to write something long, write something about itself. Inevitably, I, in my blurb scribing, returned again and again to the notion of exclusivity. So I consider exclusivity worth a further introductory mention. The most discoursing of console game players today speak of exclusives this and exclusives that, about as often as they debate which platform's version of a multi-platform game has objectively better performance. Frame rate and resolution numbers do not lie. However, the question of who has better exclusives requires subjectivity and sometimes taste. The temperature today has it that Xbox has both fewer exclusives and, despite the presence of Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, worse exclusives. Meanwhile, seemingly only to perplex matters, Sony releases their exclusives on PC a few years after on PlayStation. With much gall, publishers publicly bemoan the sales performance of timed big PlayStation exclusive games like Final Fantasy XVI or Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Meanwhile, Nintendo continues to do just fine, making billions of dollars with Zelda locked on a tablet made of gray market table scraps from like 2009. Exclusives have nonetheless formed the beating heart of the video game industry's backbone throughout this century so far, even as our definition of an exclusive warps and twists and dements itself. Microsoft owns Activision now, so do we call Call of Duty an Xbox exclusive? You can buy Starfield on Steam, though Microsoft bought Bethesda, so do we call that an Xbox exclusive? PC ports of Sony's hottest AAA open-world HBO adaptation baiters absolutely smoke their father versions in so grotesque a manner as to make the PlayStation 5 look more or less like a Walmart laptop. Do we allow these PC ports' skyrocketoriously superior presentations to shatter the stained chains of our ever-calling them PlayStation exclusive? Microsoft releases all of their exclusives on PC day one, via the Xbox app for PC, and later on Steam, though most Steam users run Steam on a Windows PC. Any Steam gamer not downloading the Xbox app on their Windows PC probably only does so for stubborn reasons. Therefore, the PC equals an Xbox. So God of War equals an Xbox game. Have, then, exclusives died? To turn back the clock and talk about the Xbox 360 lets us tourism into a simpler time, when exclusive had either a louder or sadder meaning. In the 16-bit days, exclusive meant pledging allegiance to either Mario, Sonic, or Bonk. Then the PlayStation arrived with the bold declaration that it didn't want to choose one mascot. By the PlayStation 2, we had third-party games like Grand Theft Auto 3 deserving the exclusive descriptor right alongside first-party games like Jak and Daxter. When it came time for the third PlayStation era, publishers had gotten wise to playing all sides, and the multi-platform game rose into dominance. So if you want to say the Xbox 360 lacked exclusives, you need to have not played a lot of pretty good games. And you also need to ignore hundreds or even thousands of coincidental exclusives. Games that happened on the Xbox 360 and then never elsewhere, not for lack of trying. I precisely find these particular games most beautiful. Though given the Xbox 360's historical placement at the nexus vortex of our shifting understanding of the definition of exclusive, I found it necessary to clarify the release momentary amoeba shape of many games on my list's particular category of exclusivity. At any rate, without further ado-ing of this, let's get into my list. I've chosen 36 games that I like a lot, and given myself a hard limit of exactly 300 words to explain and justify each of my recommendations, except the top slot, which I've expanded to also encompass an ouch reduction. At my regular video essayist speaking pace of almost exactly 150 words per minute, that gives me around 2 minutes per game. For the video component of this presentation, I've asked Action Button special correspondent Christa Lee to capture footage of every game running on Xbox 360 native hardware. So if you have convenient access to a YouTube-enabled internet connection, maybe check out the video version of this episode. Now, let's begin with number 36. Caladrius, developed by Moss, released on April 25th, 2013. Developer Moss released their shooting game Caladrius first on the Xbox 360. 4 months later, they released an arcade version. 11 months after that, they released it on PlayStation 3. Let's narrow our definition of exclusive down accordingly. Elephants of lanky constitution press noiselessly against the door, separating the freaks' hallway from the sitting room of layman's conversation. They threaten whisperingly to burst in, and, rather than trample, merely to induce everyone to look into their drink and say, yes. The Japanese arcade Shoot Them All represents perhaps the proudest amongst the Xbox 360's emaciated conversational pachyderms. Listen closely anytime someone says, Xbox 360. You can hear a quiet freak somewhere say, a lot of cave shooters on there. Yes, indeed. Historians debate as to why so many hurt crafters of fruitcake-dense bullet curtains felt so confident they blanket cozy about putting their gauntlets on the Xbox 360, though by God they did. And here, in the last year of the Sanrokumaru's exuberance, we see Raiden's makers at Moss executing with the Mega Driver's confidence a stately top-down shooting cacophony which introduced unto salivating experience mechanism connoisseurs the shame brake system. Basically, this means the anime girl piloting a boss's ship's clothes rip off if you kill her fast enough or with a high enough score. Giving a mechanism like that a name like Shame Break alone earns a game a place on a top 50 list, though my having actually played this game vaults it 14 places higher onto the coveted bottom of 36 rungs. As to why I first played it, well, its logo looked like Castlevania. I thought, ooh, Castlevania. Then I realized, no. Not Castlevania. Yet they'd got me. I had looked. So it goes, video games and graphic design sometimes conspire to make momentary illiterates of us all. What better customer for a shame break? Number 35. Jetpack Refueled, developed by Rare, published by Microsoft, released on March 28, 2007. Microsoft sent several Xbox 360s to my office at Sony Computer Entertainment. No one there wanted to touch them for fear of legally certifiable unwitting participation in a corporate mind game. As a maverick rule breaker, who, by the way, got that way partially because no one in the office ever put "san" at the end of my name, which I never publicly complained about back then, though let's go ahead and complain now. I grabbed an Xbox 360, Perfect Dark Zero, and Ridge Racer 6 on my way out of the office. I didn't touch them until New Year's. My friend came over and said, "You didn't tell me you had Geometry Wars." We unboxed the Xbox, plugged it in, connected to the internet, and bought Geometry Wars. Geometry Wars struck me like an oxygen-sucking cheap trick wrapped in a burlap dirt bag full of the worst music makeable. I never met a post-Geometry Wars twin-stick shooter I liked enough to put on any list. I found them joylessly mouse-cursory. I wish we'd instead had an avalanche of increasingly Gran Turismo-esque asteroids-likes, all slippery wet with slick frictionlessness. Each blast a reward wrapped in risk, some heavy like Lunar Lander, most hot like Banjo. Twin stickers aside, Xbox Live Arcade presented 360 owners a banquet table of buffet-style finger video diversions. We could craft the Desert Island Arcade to rival the 1990s out of exclusive 360 downloadables alone. I consider mentioning Perfect Dark Zero and Lunar Lander, while disliking Geometry Wars, credible reason to say I love Rare's Solar Jetman for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Solar Jetman exists in the Jetpack Lunar Jetman continuity. Thus, I love and still love Jetpack Refueled. An essential Xbox 360 games list needs at least one Xbox Live Arcade game the list maker likes that they never hear anyone else talk about. 34. Hydro Thunder Hurricane, developed by Vector Unit, published by Microsoft Game Studios, released on July 28, 2010. An essential Xbox 360 games list needs at least one Xbox Live Arcade game the list maker likes that other people like. 3 entries in, we've already had 2 decidedly quote-unquote stupid Xbox Live Arcade games. One realizes with quickness that picking just 36 games to represent the excellence of the Xbox 360 tantamounts a jerk's task. Yet I just gotta list Hydro Thunder Hurricane. I love this stupid Midway-adjacent speedboat racing game. Hydro Thunder Hurricane arrived in 2010 as an impressive visual experience, aplombious with graphical technicalities that can juice any given Maven's fruit. It remains delicious to look at that water even today. As both a guy who loved Hydro Thunder Arcade and as a guy who'd played BioShock 3 years earlier and feared the ponderousness of approaching AAA trends, this stupid speedboat racing game where you press start and then immediately race a stupid speedboat felt exactly like medicine. It tasted like Wave Race for people who'd gotten over themselves and played Jet Moto, like Blood Wake for 1080 snowboarding speedrunners. I just bought it for $2.49 on the Xbox app for PC before writing this blurb, and though it runs weirdly in a 1080p corner of a 4K window, I still had a better time in 5 minutes than I had in the 4 hours I spent knowing the kid died before the game started when I played Limbo. Coincidentally, Hydro Thunder Hurricane released alongside Limbo in the 2010 Xbox Summer of Arcade. Hydro Thunder Hurricane never came out on any other console. However, I rule that promotion as a Summer of Arcade game canonically eligibilitizes any game for the title of Xbox 360 exclusive. So by this rule, we might see Limbo show up on this list. Actually, let me spoil it. No, Limbo sucks. Number 33. Senko no Ronde Duo. Developed by Gref, published by Gref, released on May 20th, 2010. In the early 2000s, a friend and I played Twinkle Star sprites for Neo Geo in an arcade almost every Friday night. We often thought experimented about a one-on-one arcade shooter to rival fighting games. We couldn't crack it. This sufficed for the early 2000s video game designer community's equivalent of splitting the atom. When Senko no Ronde slipped into our radar range, we popped our monocles. The developers at Gref had designed a solution as elegant as, in hindsight, obvious. The 2 combatant spaceships circle strafe, Z-target locked onto one another in a cosmic spiral while the void of space screams busily in the backgroundosphere. This 2005-ish speculation regarding sci-fi future humanity might strike us as quaint today. Dystopian space warfare where the soldiers stare at one another's eyes and not their respective smartphones. Much as I show up eagerly for any video game whose title references even glancingly those fanciest dances mastered by my main man Frédéric Chopin, I squirmed upon my initial engagement with Senko no Ronde in J-arcades. I felt the game felt less slippery like space and more simply greasy. I realize in hindsight, I spurned the game because my treasuresque heft-hungry notions of the correct way to make such a game shielded my jealous eyes from director Hiroyuki Maruyama's brilliance. That man produced Kokuga, directed Border Down, and specially thanksed both Bujingai and my favorite shooter under defeat. It blocked my ears against ex-Sonata composer Yasuhisa Watanabe. I later adored the Xbox 360 version online against friends. I could include the original Senko no Ronde simply to enjoy arguing that online multiplayer can qualify a game as exclusive, yet I must give this slot to 2010's Senko no Ronde Duo. It has more characters and a better story mode, and you can purchase its 2017 remaster on Steam right now. Number 32. Guilty Gear 2 Overture. Developed and published by Arc Systems Works. Released on November 29th, 2007. Let's all stop ignoring Guilty Gear 2 Overture. At the time of its arrival, no one reckoned it honestly. As a game developer, game critic, and frequent arcade player of Guilty Gear XX Accent Core, even I scoffed at its announcement. Today, let's appreciate the bigness of its swing. After 9 years of neglecting to put anything resembling a conventionally marketable numeral or suffix after their fighting game title, which to begin with more befitted a noise rock band, Arc System Works announced Guilty Gear 2 as a completely different experience format. They boldly intended to eschew two-dimensional fighting in favor of some kind of a three-dimensional online arena for multiple battlers. The decision perplexed my arcade acquaintances, none of whom bought Xboxes. To them, Daisuke Ishiwatari had thrown his decade of scholars drilling toward the philosophical technical core of fighting games into the trash to chase some gaudy fling. I read an interview with Ishiwatari on Silicon Era at the time. He praised first-person shooters and real-time strategy, particularly Dota and Warcraft 3. He even evoked the name Herzog 2. I did not doubt his sincerity to begin with, though when I and a friend eventually purchased Guilty Gear 2 for 129 yen in a bargain bin in January 2008, I discovered Ishiwatari had, in fact, delved with a true Swiss watchmakerly detail attentiveness. 2 years before League of Legends, here existed a perfectly curious poking gesture toward the arena-destined future of electronic sports. As an early champion of riskily genre-diverse competitive games, I must include this game. I also must include it because every contemporary blogger said it looked like Dynasty Warriors. As someone who, and loudly, didn't get Dynasty Warriors until Dragon Quest asked me to, I might have made the same dismissive mistake were it not for that fateful bargain bin. Number 31. The Last Remnant. Developed and published by Square Enix. Released on November 20th, 2008. I speak before you today as a dual citizen. Using my voice as action button, I read words I typed as from insert credit antiquity. My dark entanglement to that latter, lesser world compulsively requires me to point out that, technically, since remnants as a rule remain in the absence of aught else, literally every remnant qualifies as one of the last remnants. We thus chastise Square Enix for their failure to choose a stronger adjective. Call the sequel at least Ultimate Remnancy. I like The Last Remnant a whole lot more than just fine. I could talk about its battle system's spirited invocation of crusty hard JRPGs. I could, weirdo-tantalizingly, describe it as Romancing Saga, the movie, the video game. I prefer approaching it from a criticism historian's perspective. We all love 7 out of 10 video games. While I, as a spiritual, i.e. not legal, child of 2 countries, love to think about what I have until right now privately called the J8, a game which received 8s out of 10 in Japan, yet westerly scored 6s or below. The Last Remnant, despite its Famitsu score of 38 out of 40, averaging to a 9.5, received a D from 1UP, a 6.5 from GameSpot, a 5.3 from IGN, and if you other scores that don't support my argument. Yes, the JRPG much misliked Western critical circle jerkers circa Xbox 360. Each arriving sterling exemplary JRPG those daily got roundly blamed for every aspect of the format that had ever differed from exactly BioShock or precisely Gears of War or basically Uncharted. The Last Remnant, which you can briskly enjoy today as a 2018 remaster, even got groin-kicked for daring to have similar texture pop-in and frame drops to every other Unreal 3 game. What a darn pity. Late 2000s JRPGs totally own. Play some. Number 30. Cyber Troopers Virtual On Force, developed by AM3, published by Sega, released on December 22nd, 2010. GIFs or GIFs of few games attract quite so many responses from AI catfish punctuationlessly asking OMG what game as a Virtual On Cyber Troopers. You can't blame these false children for their fascination. These games put forth quite the effort toward earning our future historians' certification as the most 60 FPS experience of all time. Sega put out 3 blazing beautiful Virtual On games between 1995 and 2001. Operation Moongate, Oratorio Tangram, and Force. They could have gone with a better subtitle for the 3rd game in their series than a single word that starts with the entire pronunciation of the number 4. Remember when Ubisoft called the 3rd Prince of Persia the 2 Thrones? That numerological misstep might have killed the franchise. Maybe that also happened to Virtual On. Sega called the PlayStation 2ification of the 3rd Virtual On Mars. They gutted out the namesakely 4-player 2-on-2 battles and hyped the new story mode. 9 years later, Sega's resident permagoblins at AM3 saw fit to exhume Virtual On Force, remaster it scaldingly for the Xbox 360, and restore the 4-player battles. They electrified it with a mission mode, online multiplayer, co-op boss battles, and split screen. You can even play it LAN party style. The bountiful additions more than qualify it as exclusive, as do the 9-year gaps between its original release and remastering, and between its remastering and its re-inclusion in the buyable now Japan-only PlayStation 4 Omnibus Virtual On Masterpiece 1995-2001. More even than I recommend that compilation, I love what the Xbox 360 version represents. The ice-cold, dagger-sharp Mega Driver's freakism lurking inextinguishable within the core of corporate Sega. That gumption alone made sequels to Jet Set Radio, Crazy Taxi, and Panzer Dragoon on the original Xbox. Like someone dwelling underneath Sega, took one look at the 360 and said, exhaling a blimp-sized cloud of smoke, "Yeah, I know what these psychos need." Number 29. Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts, developed by Rare, published by Microsoft, released on November 11th, 2008. I include this game firstly because I like it, and secondly because it affords me an opportunity to say I do not like Banjo-Kazooie or Banjo-Tooie on Nintendo 64. I find their structures obnoxious, their narrative tones combative, and their movement joyless. Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts exactly fixes one of those complaints, half fixes another, and leaves the other alone. Yes, the NPCs and protagonists still can't get through an endless paragraph without multiple loud, basic wishes that their conversation partner die an instant death. Though apart from the fact that they once again let a Victorian-era insult jokebook writer handle the dialogue, the rest of the game sparkles. Here, the Rare that once published Solar Jetman before their exile to Donkey Kong Country shows a forest fire-sized spark of the design genius that later produced the wonderful Sea of Thieves. A whole decade and a half before Zelda's Kingdom cried, Rare made a game about building weird vehicles and using them to tackle noodly challenges. predicting Minecraft, Fortnite, and Nintendo all at the same time, in hindsight really makes that gargantuan price tag Microsoft paid to acquire the Conker Blokes look like a sign inside a Walmart. Bizarrely, despite the dreary, borderline nihilistic characterizations of its cartoon inhabitants, the game's shtick wherein it, repeatedly, expresses self-awareness as a stupid video game for idiots encourages a with-the-flow going even in a stickler like myself. Bonus points for permanent forward compatibility on new Xboxes, bonus points for its predecessors' Xbox versions, ridiculously outclassing anything Nintendo ever did with Super Mario 64, and bonus points for making, at the time, fan children deranged at the prospect of a Banjo with vehicles. However, I must banish it to 29th place, because I just remembered Viva Pinata, and I realize I have a better chance of finding the actual Zodiac killer than understanding why someone greenlit Viva Pinata. Number 28. Eternal Sonata. Developed by Tri-Crescendo. Published by Bandai Namco. Released on June 14th, 2007. Let me quote for you the first sentence of Wikipedia's attempt to summarize Eternal Sonata, published in Japan with the superior name Trusty Bell. The story follows Polish romantic pianist and composer Frédéric Chopin, who died of tuberculosis at the age of 39, and his adventure in a fictional world that he dreams as he is dying, which is influenced by his life and music, and which he and others are playable characters. If that don't get you putting on pants and heading to Yodobashi Camera in 2007, get a PlayStation 3. I don't pretend to understand all the business deals that happened behind the scenes of Microsoft's attempt to take over the Japanese games industry circa 2005, though, dude, they greenlit some ridiculous stuff. I imagine Bill Gates in a Santa Claus suit, lugging a big sack of money while IRS agents sit earpieces on in a van across the street. Sweating J-game developers don't even see Bill coming. They pitch him wild, fever-dreamed concepts improvisationally, not at all expecting a response of an adult diaper full of large bill cash and an exclamation of, "Can you get started right now?" Eternal Sonata amounts to more than just a delightful Japanese role-playing game with a Valkyrie prophilic pedigree. It also contains educational documentary segments, and a soundtrack blasted full of virtuoso piano performances by Stanislav Bunin. He won the International Chopin Piano Competition in 1985. My buddy Ayrton Senna qualified for that back in 1996. This game came out on PlayStation 3 a year later, probably because Namco Bandai didn't want to leave any money, however dubiously provenanced, on the table. Though it likely owes the totality of its existence to some curious Valkyrie profile enamored tastemaker backstage at Microsoft. Nobody at Sony seemed too eager to fund these guys to make something new and wild. Number 27. Star Ocean, The Last Hope. Developed by Tri-Ace, published by Square Enix, released on February 19th, 2009. Let me tell you the truth. Except for exactly 2, I originally purchased every Japanese role-playing game on this list brand new from a bargain bin in Akihabara mere weeks after its release. I imagine this might not have contributed to the badness of Xbox's business. Bloggers frequently laughed at Microsoft's failure to crack the PlayStation-flavored ice coating the Japanese games industry. They loved to mockingly post double-digit sales numbers and make crude assumptions about what type of alcohol the 12 or 16 new Japanese Xbox purchasers stank like. Past a certain point, I don't think a single erstwhile Mega Driver riding and or dying for the Sanrokumaru paid full price for anything. We knew all too well the spawn patterns of the bargain bins, and thus an emulator's fickleness trickled into any and all engagements. Did I enjoy Star Ocean: The Last Hope in April of 2009? Why, yes, I did. Did I $60 enjoy it? I know of money well enough to say I can never answer that question. I paid 606 yen. I played it on my Sony Bravia. I must have said to myself 20, 30 times, boy, that Tri-Ace sure can make the heck out of a video game. I enjoyed it for a dozen hours, at which point I had conspicuously acquired a different entertainment. In a sinister simulacrum of my bargain bin mining expeditions, Square Enix made their real money on this game when they released a fully beta-tested version on PlayStation 3 a year later, and then proceeded to only ever release remasters for PlayStation 4 and Windows. I revisited it on PC in 2022 and found it, like its number-forgetful most recent installment, a darling monument to they don't make 'em like they used to-ism. Factually and correctly, and spiritually truthfully, I declare all Star Ocean games Xbox 360 games. Number 26. Forza Horizon. Playground Games, Microsoft Studios. Released on October 23rd, 2012. I have never had a good time at a real music festival. I like attending live music performances. I like it so much I made it a core facet of my personality throughout my 20s. Yet the prospect of traveling to a remote locale to choose which 6 of 200 bands I kind of want to walk 4 miles each to see while it probably rains does not thrill me. Thus, Forza Horizon, in befuddlingly settling itself at a music festival, got off on the wrong wheel with me. Yet somehow I loved it. Maybe I just missed Ridge Racer too much. The whole atmosphere of racing games had changed right around when Gran Turismo 3 showed up. I told everyone I knew to play it. None of them played it. I had pitched it to my friends as an open-worldish driving game with real cars. A Burnout Paradise-like, set in Colorado instead of a bustling metropolis. I told my friends, they brought back the big-budget arcade-style racing game. One guy didn't like Burnout Paradise. One guy didn't like open-world games. One guy didn't like Colorado. Except they all eventually accepted that non-serious racing games have become this now. They all dabbled in at least one Forza Horizon. I consider this crucial. Each new Forza Horizon game Katamari's in more people. The review scores over the past decade have glacially blimped. I've played every Forza Horizon game on record, yet none snared my usually reliably latent completionist's gene quite like that first one. When someone plays their first Forza Horizon, their enthusiasm makes it known. 26th place feels right for a game whose sequels make me question the quantity of my remaining time on Earth, even as they, as joyfully as corporately possible, carry the banner of ancient arcade racers. Number 25. Ridge Racer 6. Developed and published by Namco. Released on November 22nd, 2005. Ah, delicious numeral discussion. The Xbox 360 launched on November 22nd, 2005. 1122. Everyone respects numbers during that 1 month of the year whose digits resemble 2/3 of the mark of the beast. Ridge Racer 6 also debuted that day, as the ancients predicted when they said fast graphics move units. Since December 3rd, 1994, a Ridge Racer accompanied any PlayStation console launch. Somehow only 3 PlayStations even existed at all during the development of Ridge Racer 6. The one Ridge Racer per PlayStation launch still felt like an uncontradictable law of the universe. Someone at Microsoft must have patted their own back and belly real hard to have secured a Ridge Racer development handshake from a Namco honcho. Why, with the Ridge Racer, Microsoft's new console practically equaled a PlayStation. And for the first time since 2000's Ridge Racer 5, Namco had even promised to increment the suffix numeral. Add to this sacred gesture the whisper-quiet fact that Ridge Racer 5 represented the only Ridge Racer game to date whose name consisted of simply Ridge Racer number. A plain-spoken incrementation of the numeral must have seemed to Microsoft's bigger wig-wearing number conspiracy theorists a lightning strike of money luck. Yet we quickly forget these cold, rememberable numeral-involving facts in light of Namco's repetition of the number-bumping action almost exactly 1 year later with Ridge Racer 7 on PlayStation 3, released on November 11th, 2006. 1111. The number of the beast with an extra in there for evil omen. Namco never released a Ridge Racer 8. Gran Turismo's ilk muscled them out of existence. Yet today, let's say, the franchise had run its course before Ridge Racer 7. It had done so inside Ridge Racer 6. 7 might have featured 1080p graphics, though with 6, Namco had milked the last of the rock. Hot game. Backward compatible, too. Number 24. Guy Mao Zeria. Developed by Red Company, published by Hudson Soft, released on March 23rd, 2006. I can offer no more succinct a revelation about Red Company and Hudson Soft's virtuosic 60 FPS 3D 2006 Xbox 360 remake of their 1989 PC Engine classic, Guy Mao Zeria, than this. I know a guy who has not played it. Literally everyone I know who you expect has played at least a little of this game has in fact not played it. Most of them, in fact, have not even heard of it. According to Wikipedia, we came this close to someone else in my acquaintance sphere besides myself having played this game because Victor Ireland's post-Working Designs game publishing house Gaijin Works planned a localization. However, they could not, and I quote, get past Microsoft's publishing minimums. I don't even know what that means, aside from Microsoft might want to take a look at those minimums. I want to brag to you about having played this game. I want to speak fondly, albeit repetitiously, of the time I bought this game for 802 yen at the bargain bin outside the Good Soft Map in Akihabara on a fine evening in May of 2006. I want to tell you I called up a friend who had played all the PC Engine Guy Makios. However, maybe you don't even know this game exists. How could you care? Well, if you have an Xbox 360 and interest in learning Japanese, this game has furigana. If you lack interest in learning Japanese, some fans have released a translation in 2023. Play it, and maybe you, like me, can annoy people by talking about a video game they've never heard of. Also, play it to achieve a deeper understanding of the part in the Wednesday Campanella song Momotaro, where she emphatically states, Guy Mao Tsu. You could also, if you want, play the Guy Mao 2 remake for PlayStation 2. Number 23. Outrun Online Arcade, developed by Sumo Digital, published by Sega, released on April 15th, 2009. Better versions of Outrun 2 exist. They have more modes, more cars, and more music tracks. Even the PSP version of Outrun 2 smokes the Xbox Live Arcade Outrun Online Arcade in terms of feature richness. To that, I say, wow, Sega sure couldn't decide what to call ports of Outrun 2. Maybe at some point during its virtuosic run in Japanese arcades, they decided Outrun describes a lifestyle, not a series. For the Xbox and PlayStation and PSP, they even put a year and a subtitle on there, like so as to position Outrun next to Madden and 2K in terms of return expectability. The world missed a richness when Ferrari let their contract with Sega expire in 2010. Outrun Online Arcade vanished from digital storefronts. And we all missed a bounty because Microsoft clown-glovedly bungled the timing on their bumping of Xbox Live Arcade game size limits from 350 megabytes to 2 gigabytes. If Sumo Digital's overlords at Sega had waited a few months, Outrun Online Arcade for Xbox 360 could have equaled the truest possible Outrun 2 experience. Instead, we got what we got. A stripped-down, lean, arcade-faithful Outrun 2 for Xbox 360. Yes, it came out on PlayStation 3 in Europe, though I call a mulligan. In the USA, it only came out on Xbox 360. I don't know why, and I don't care. I have played through Outrun in its various forms more than 2,000 times in my life. It never gets old. And on the night of April 16th, 2009, it got new, because I played it with 5 real-life friends around the world online via Xbox Live. The game cost $8. Reviews at the time claimed the online races suffered from lag. For a total of 20 hours over 2 weeks, none of us cared. Number 22. Zapan XOR and Zapan NOT, developed by Cavia, published by Bandai Namco, released on July 27, 2006 and December 6, 2006. Cavia, everyone's favorite brightly burning, uncapitalized video game development studio from Japan, released 2 separate all-time great Xbox 360 games on July 27, 2006. Then, they released the sequel to one of those games just 19 weeks later, on December 6, 2006. Zapan, arguably the less significant of the 2 7/27/06 Cavia incidents, got the quick sequel. Though for the purpose of this list, I want to count both Zapan XOR and Zapan NOT as one game. After all, they boasted cross-disc online multiplayer battles, a concept they literally had to release 2 interconnected games in a 5-month period to even probably begin thinking about having to invent. If you've never played Zapan or even heard of it, ask yourself if you really, really like Zone of the Enders and wish they had made way too much more of it. If you answered yes, and you don't mind 2 games with lengthy cutscenes that sort of require you to watch a just kind of okay companion anime series and 2 lethargic anime films to semi-understand, welcome, my friend, to the stage of history. Zapan feels like Zone of the Enders, the way that Drakengard feels like Dynasty Warriors. Connoisseurs of aggressive action hamburger handfuls may find rich delight in its blazing technicalities. Aesthetics enjoyers might go wild at the Sunrise Inc. pedigree of the robots and characters. Armored Core fans might not like it. Character customization specialists might love the host of options. And Cavia historians might appreciate the gentle flavor of the ill-fated developer's trademark, desperate, hubristic, bit-off more than they can chewitiveness. These 2 episodic transmedia anime tie-in games each end like a quiet dream, far before overstaying even the most reluctant of welcomes. I purchased both of Cavia's July 27th, 2006 games day 1, full price, at a shop in Akihabara I called The Good Store. I beat Zapan that night. Number 21. Enchanted Arms. Developed by From Software. Published in Japan by From Software. Published in the Elsewheres by Ubisoft. Released on January 12th, 2006. Enchanted Arms, released in Japan as Emu Enchantoame, arrived during the Xbox 360's launch window as yet another Japanese-developed game commissioned by some phantom tastemaker with bizarre ideas regarding strategy. Unfortunately, as Enchanted Arms released at the height of the Western critical establishment's silent conspiracy to cut Japanese role-playing games zero slack, and released 3 years BDS before Demon's Souls, it also landed well before game critics worldwide caught up with the players who always knew From Software for a meticulous cabal of stone-faced goat crafters. So in Japan, it scored a 29 out of 40 from Famitsu and got a 6 out of 10 from Edge. So add another generously rounded up J8 to our list. I had a Monster Kingdom Jewel Summoner UMD slotted into the PSP 2000 in my backpack at the exact moment I encountered Enchantarm for 1,240 yen in the bargain bin in front of the good soft map in Akihabara, and as a deviant Persona-playing Megaten-liker who owned both Eternal Ring and Evergrace, I had basically performed the great entertainment equivalent of painting myself into a corner. I apply no caveats to this opinion. I enjoyed the wheels off of Enchantarm. I adored its hinky, far-future, real-life, dark anime Harry Potter setting. I loved it as a wild glimpse at the ocean of possible Whole Foods store-brand Final Fantasy XIIIs. I liked its just-too-meticulous tactical grid battle system. Here we could play Moby Games ping-pong and talk about how the director Masato Miyazaki did game design on Metal Wolf Chaos and 3D art on Otogi and Otogi 2 before directing Enchantarm and doing art on Ninja Blade before performing lead art duties on Demon's Souls. We could do this sort of thing for many of its staff members, though let's not. Just look at it. This game rules. Number 20. The Idolmaster. Developed by Metro, published by Namco on January 25th, 2007. My friends and I used to know a guy who liked the Idolmaster arcade game. This guy fit the definition of a real piece of work better than maybe anyone I've ever met. He departed friendly gatherings for a period of months with the hint that he had to go check on his girls, which we ignored, resulting in his clarification that he meant he intended to go to the arcade to play some Idolmaster. I don't know. I felt weird about the game after that. Well, these days I don't let other people ruin a potential good time, so in early March 2020 I checked out Idolmaster for the Xbox 360. Yes, friends, we have cracked into our first entry on this list I did not play on release in Japan on Xbox 360 hardware, or even from a bargain bin. Nope, I stole Idolmaster, dude. I played it with a researcher's interest as I cobbled together materials for my video review of Tokimeki Memorial. Through Princess Maker and Idolmaster, I sought to obtain a frame of reference regarding raising sims that I ended up not getting any use out of. I sure did enjoy the smooth, silky texture of the user experience, though. I can see the great ideas behind the architects' intentions. They wanted to make a game players played every day, either at an arcade on the way home or by checking in online through Xbox Live on its feature-beefed home version. Maybe my playing the game so proximal to the launch of Animal Crossing New Horizons and the coronavirus painted my perceptions with a rosy glow. Either way, the game worked, despite my own vastly preferring the music of classic J-idols from the 1980s, back when they sang in groups smaller than like 96 girls. Number 19. Lost Planet Extreme Condition, developed and published by Capcom, released on December 21st, 2006. I don't want to talk too far out of my hat here, great behind closed doors business deals of the early 21st century, though I presume Microsoft's quirky taste-making marionetteers implanted in Japan flung a lot of money to big-name J-publishers to craft them unique exclusive hits to crush the PlayStation into a fine powder. Here, we might theorize said publishers took the money and spent as tiny a fraction as legal on a perfunctory game safely nestled in an original intellectual property no one knew how to love or hate, then allocated the rest of the cash wad to developing a PlayStation game in a beloved IP and or buying new Rolexes for 12 invisible senior citizens who already owned 6 Rolexes each. One could slip easily into this cynicism for most of the peculiar big J games of the Xbox 360 era, even Capcom's. Yet I today choose optimism. I think Capcom took that money and said, well, let's make cool stuff. Let's let our weirdos go hog wild. So we got Lost Planet and Dead Rising. Dead Rising gives you choices. Lost Planet resulted from choices. Capcom chose to set this whole game in the snow. Capcom chose to give the guy a grappling hook. Capcom chose to let the then white-hot K-drama leading man Byung-hun Lee to star. Capcom chose to make a modern prestige Gears of War contemporaneous third-person shooter with all the straightforwardness of their Famicom-era hits. Critics cried out for Mega Man, though they had it right here, man. Lost Planet 2 has more features, though I've got to hand it to the original. Shame about the subtitle. As a Gen Xer, I live by 3 rules. Don't wear a band's t-shirt to their show. Don't make a t-shirt for your own band before it's played a show. And never give the first game in your series a subtitle. Number 18. Dead Rising. Developed and published by Capcom. Released on August 8th, 2006. Let's keep on exuding optimism for Microsoft's Japan-embedded behind-closed-door money-bag man with then-questionable taste in modern timesly bulletproof video games. Let's slap this hypothetical guy on the back real hard and hypothesize that Microsoft specifically requested Capcom spend at least half of their huge check on a game directed by Yoshinori Kawano, director of Mega Man Legends and Mega Man Legends 2 and The Misadventures of Tron Bonne and Breath of Fire 3, the best Breath of Fire. Microsoft, in my fantasy, further requested a scenario overseen by Makoto Ikehara, director of Breath of Fire 5 Dragon Quarter. Gently, and with the wisdom of over 40 years breathing earth oxygen, I whisper unto you, not a single one of these stone-cold clusterpiece games I just named exactly made Resident Evil money. So when I read of the urban truthism that Capcom opted to not connect their multi-ending 53,594 zombies in a shopping center choose-your-own schlock hack journalism simulator to the Resident Evil series for reasons of lack of plot seriousness, I lick my lips. Mull walk through the Moby games, and ye shall find credits more stacked than a Smash Bros. Roster. Assistant producer Haruki Halki Yutaka previously main-programmed such MSX classics as Nightmare 2, The Maze of Gallius, and Nemesis 2. Everyone in a major role on this game came from Mega Man Legends or Breath of Fire and went on to work on Dragon's Dogma, Monster Hunter, or Dark Souls, monoliths of literary friction. Dead Rising here dripulates with triculations of meticulous decision friction. Minds boggled cosmic horrifically upon glimpsing its big shiny Rubik's Cube in 2006. I then called it Breath of Fire 5 with a sense of humor. I today double down on that. We must respect this vortex nexus of design expertise, if for no reason other than that apparently Sony didn't want to throw money at it. Number 17. Infinite Undiscovery, developed by Tri-Ace, published by Square Enix, released on December 2nd, 2008. Ah, Tri-Ace. They must have had the motto, why not make more than one game? Okay, look, ranked list numerology aside, I do not today seek to redeem Infinite Undiscovery. I do not desire to declare it a mislooked jewel. I love the game, and fondly recall a winter 2008 weekend which kicked off with a trip to the bargain bin at the Good Soft Map in Akihabara. Yet I dare not attempt to convince you to bear the burden of my enthusiasm. You can get the game backward compatible on your Xbox Series X if you like its look. Play it and you find a massively single-player Japanese role-playing game awash in the environmental spaciousness of current-day fan magnets like Xenoblade Chronicles. You might enjoy its 15-hour length. However, I assure you, in 2008, many Western reviews used it as a mic-dropping platform. They hated the auto-battle party members. I cannot find one review that doesn't pause a moment to comment on the title, describing Undiscovery as not a real word. These Poindexters never said that about BioShock. Infinite Undiscovery represents perhaps the most perfect example of a J8 yet. It scored literally a 32 out of 40 from Famitsu, a 3.5 from Destructoid, a 5 from Eurogamer, a 6 from Edge, and a 7 from IGN. Let's call this a J8 flush. If we look at James Stephanie Sterling's diss track on Destructoid, we see a crystalline instance of circa 2008 Western critics' dwindling interest in engaging with the JRPG in good faith. A perfect snapshot of the runaway opinion train on a collision course for December 2009's Final Fantasy XIII. They refer to the game as aimless, cliché, confusing, and button-mashy. However, good faith engagers today might have a breezy time with many granularities fine-tuned toward the persnickety preferences of good faith genre connoisseurs. Number 16. Halo Reach! Developed by Bungie, published by Microsoft, released on September 14th, 2010. I love Halo 3. I played it online. I tinkered with the Forge mode. I shredded through the campaign alone, with 3 acquaintances, with 2 friends, with 1 good friend, and with a great friend on Legendary. I consider the biggest, hugest of its set pieces some of the best, pure, ecstatic playgrounds in video game history. I reviewed it once, making multiple heavy comparisons to childlikeness, calling it the sophisticated technological modern analog to Tonka trucks and Tinker toys. I realize different types of people like different Halos for different reasons, and while different parts of me like those first 3 Halos for different reasons, the beautiful memories of playing Halo 3 on Xbox Live with friends, literally around the world, send it over the top. However, today, I want to talk about Halo Reach. Halo Reach came out in September of 2010. I moved back to the United States from Japan on July 22nd, 2010. I did not have an apartment and a reliable income source until May 6th, 2011. The next day, I bought an Xbox 360, Red Dead Redemption, and Halo Reach. I had enjoyed literally nothing in my life for 10 months. And, not to get ahead of ourselves, I went on enjoying nothing for the next 13 years. I played Halo Reach stone alone, a professional grimace on my face, breaking down its formulas in my head for purposes worky, arriving ultimately at the calculated conclusion that, yeah, this smokes all the others. I've played through the campaign many times over the years with friends online, and I recommend that over a simulacrum of my first experience, though even alone on a 19-inch LCD monitor, that sweetly brief campaign shines with encounter design brilliance, delicious massive-scale environments, and miraculous architectural geometry. I even paid attention to the story. Number 15. Gears of War 2. Developed by Epic Games, published by Microsoft, released on 7 November 2008. Ah, the Xbox 360. The game console voted in its high school yearbook most likely to wind up impossible to buy on Craigslist without getting some guy's CD wallet full of Maddens. If you look closely at those blurry CD wallet photographs, you might, however, see a friend. Gears of War 2. Sometimes Gears of War 1 as well, and occasionally also Gears of War 3, though almost always Gears of War 2. In a review written shortly after its release, I called it Video Games the Video Game. Today, I have little to add to that. At the time, I meant that snippy phraseology for the ultimate compliment. I bestowed upon it this, a game which knew itself and its nature exactly. A game which sequeled an existing game with just enough technical refinement and dramatic escalation in its presentation. At the time, I sensed a rising tide of games whose E3 press appointment carnival barkers plied bloggers with big muffins and spoke of immersion and other jargons. I despised BioShock, and I hated Elder Scrolls, and I disliked Fallout 3. I wanted, a little meat-headedly, I admit, forgive me, I went to the gym a lot in those days, games that understood themselves. To borrow a turn of phrase from Dave Moss and Glengarry Glen Ross, I wanted a game that did not try to sell me 5 cars in 15 years. Gears of War 2 only wanted me to play its horde mode, and to play through its satisfaction-guaranteed, comically perfectly level-designed campaign, 2-player co-op online with literally every single real friend I had at the time. I loved Gears of War 2 as a perfect AAA Contra. Can you imagine if Konami had tried to make a Contra like this? Critics would have bitten their heads off. Number 14. Alan Wake. Developed by Remedy, published by Microsoft, released on May 14th, 2010. In my real and private life, I have attended a couple of tapings of a particular Emmy Award-winning TV talk show. Before every taping, the host comes out to warm up the audience. He says to please not inhibit yourself from laughing. He says that he, too, occasionally witnesses comedy he personally finds hilarious with a knowing nod and an out-loud cold declaration of, good joke. He asks us not to do that here, tonight. I feel like almost every horror game I have ever played does sort of exactly the same thing as that. Constantly. Maybe 30 years ago, I couldn't have avoided accusations of contrarian edginess for saying this, though I don't get scared by horror films or even horror games. Maybe I have something wrong with my brain. I can enjoy horror, though it usually requires me to perform that TV show host's equivalent of a knowing nod. The best horror in my experience makes me say, nice effect, or great camera angle. Anything trying to make me feel weird or afraid just starts to remind me of an ocean of people I wish I hadn't known in my 20s. I don't dare call my taste in horror cerebral. Far from it, actually. I like it stupid as long as it stays interesting. In doing for Stephen King what Max Payne did for John Woo, Alan Wake gave me a breed of horror perfectly attuned to my preferences. And it interested me by having the most Chevy truck solid, straightforward, arcade-style action as possible. I cannot find fault in the flashlight. Yes, even compared to Resident Evil 4, which, for the record, I do not consider a horror game. Finally, let me point out that Alan Wake 1 didn't come out on PC until 2 years after it came out on Xbox. Number 13. Project Sylphid, developed by Game Arts, published by Square Enix, released on September 28, 2006. As a fan of Grandia, Gun Griffin, Macross, Jungle Strike, Colony Wars, Armored Core, Ace Combat, Warhawk, Crimson Skies, and Rogue Squadron, I felt bound by blood pact to purchase Project Sylphid. So of course I waited 3 months before I saw it for 1,191 yen in the bargain bin outside the Good Soft Map in Akihabara. I had one Xbox 360 owning friend at this time who also loved Gun Griffin, Ace Combat, Rogue Squadron, and Macross. I told him about this game, and he said he had also loved Sylphid on Sega CD and had no immediate interest in playing a misspelled quote-unquote reboot because it lacked the ancient original's top-down perspective, and also game developers gotta come up with some original ideas. Sometimes even a professional people understander's just gotta shrug and walk away. In the moment, minds boggled at Square Enix's selection of games to splurt out using Daddy Microsoft's cash sack. And in hindsight, the mind still kinda boggles, IMO. Though at least now we fully understand the full scope and scale of their then-forthcoming mystery attack with Final Fantasy XIII. They sure saved their specialist best for Sony, didn't they? Well, all these years later, I declare the joke hath sprung on them. Square Enix has chosen 4 gracious gestural oddball trinkety Xbox 360 titles. Best capture the sparkling spirit of modern-day spaghetti-flinging era Square Enix, the true Square Enix. And I love them all dearlier than I've ever gone on record to say. Project Sylphid tops them all, much as its contemporary critics flew Icarus proximity to my aforesaid friend's idiot proclamation. They called this game too hard, too confusing, too big, too technical. They called its plot a dopey, tropey soap opera. I only see a chill J-drama in space, wrapping a game that respects aggressive technicality connoisseurs. Number 12. Students of Round. Developed and published by Experience Inc. Released on February 10th, 2011. Students of Round did come out first on Windows in April 2010, though the 1 year later Xbox 360 version included, according to an Experience Inc. fandom wiki, new monsters, new items, new dungeons, new background music, and new story segments featuring all new event visuals. Furthermore, and I consider this crucial, the first print run of the game also includes a code that swaps out the normal artwork for super deformed chibi versions of the characters. That sounds bare minimally enough like a remake for me. Though let's time travel back to 2011 and ask my buddy who bought an Xbox 360 for this game. Actually, we don't have to ask him because that alone says it. First-person dungeon crawlers fascinate me. I've poured hundreds of hours of my life into them. Maybe this doesn't surprise you, given my frequent statements of love for the Dragon Quest series, which also features first-person party combat some call bland. I think about build-a-party dungeon crawlers similarly to how I think about tactical strategy games. For example, that I don't wish the task of designing one on my worst enemy. The margin for error fits on the edge of a razor. I can barely gather articulate words talking about Students of Round because I haven't played it in 10 years, though when I did play it, I understood the appeal of pachinko. It just worked and flowed. The Gordon Ramsay finally some good freaking food .gif of wizardries. Furthermore, they remastered this Xbox 360 version for PSP and then remastered it again for Vita, and then remastered that Vita version for Nintendo Switch. You can buy a janky port of it now, titled Saviors of Sapphire Wings, on Steam today, for a price you can consider fair if you bought the triple pack of Etrian Odyssey DDSification's full price Day 1 Digital Deluxe. Number 11, Pac-Man Championship Edition, Namco Bandai Games, published on June 6th, 2007 worldwide. I have talked about this game a lot over the past 17 years. In 2007, I called it Game of the Year. I later put it in the top 10 of my best games ever list. Today, at age 45, I have officially spent too much of my life thinking about Pac-Man, and coincidentally, also I have relaxed a bit about concepts such as ranking numbers on stupid lists of video games. So I opt to place Pac-Man Championship Edition just below the top 10 of my list of essential Xbox 360 games. I loved what it did to re-essentialize Pac-Man's then presumed dated design and revitalize its ancient aesthetic with an injection of neon-flavored, decidedly retro style. I adored the wonderful bandwagoners that emerged, namely Taito's Space Invaders Extreme and Namco's Galaga Legions. I applauded the gesture of Toru Iwatani, the creator of maybe the most by-definition classic of all classic video games, coming back to polish his old masterwork, now with his finalized design understanding. I appreciate this game as an architectural and industrial artifact, as much as I admire Microsoft's gumption to bring Iwatani up on stage at Tokyo Game Show as though an Xbox Live leaderboard-enabled global Pac-Man tournament made up for the other guys having, for example, and for the moment, Final Fantasy. I love the sticky little touches. I love that sparks fly as Pac-Man grinds around corners. Today, however, the game has faded into the mists of the boat has sailedishness. Back then, I found its 5-minute time limit, shifting maze, and arcane scoring quaintly encouraging. Then they made too many paraphernalious sequels, including a versus game that I actually owned, and somewhere along the line I got good enough at regular Pac-Man to earnestly say I like it more. And in all honesty, I love M2's NES remake of Pac-Man Championship Edition the most. Number 10, Shadowrun, developed by FASA Interactive, published by Microsoft Games Studios, is released on May 29th, 2007. Just so nobody gets confused, I now intend to discuss Shadowrun for the Microsoft Xbox 360, not Shadowrun for the Sega Mega CD, not Shadowrun for the Sega Genesis, not Shadowrun for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. The most Microsoft-published of Shadowruns released on both the Xbox 360 and the Windows PC at the same time. Yet we count it as an Xbox 360 game because in enabling yet unprecedented cross-platform multiplayer between Xbox 360 and PC, Microsoft had, for the moment, fused the platforms inextricably. Unfortunately, the magnitude of this magnanimity did not completely impress 2007's competitive game aficionados. Mostly, prospective players and critics complained about the price tag. They did not consider an online multiplayer competitive game with no story campaign worth $60, no matter how freakishly good its team-based game design. Old-school Shadowrunners scowled at the prospect of everything becoming a first-person shooter these days, and bemoaned the lack of RPG elements. Microsoft released an excellent online-enabled demo, practically begging skeptics to get in and have wild fun. It pretty much didn't work outside my friend group, far as I could tell. Like a lightning bolt during one session, I learned to want an Xbox Elite controller's back paddles to jump and look simultaneously. To this day, I have never met a AAA video game designer who both loves Shadowrun for Xbox 360 and has designed a game that sucks even a little bit. Set aside the notion that this game crowbarred open the thinking around multiplayer FPS mode possibilities so wide with its class-based magic and healing systems that it practically left the door ajar for aspiring MOBAs and yet unrealized hero shooters, and just bask in the fact that it rules supremely, entirely on its own intact merits today. Play it with friends right now if you can. Number 9. Ninja Blade. Developed by From Software, published by Microsoft Games Studios, released on January 29th, 2009. It perhaps speaks too specifically of my now embarrassing then proximity to circa 2008 speculative online discussion about video games that more starkly than any other fact concerning From Software's lovely game Ninja Blade, I recall the time Ninja Gaiden director Tomonobu Itagaki said it sucked because it had QuickTime events in it. Itagaki clearly acted out of defensiveness for his own precious shinobi child, 2008's gore-schlocky grindhouse anime, Ninja Gaiden 2. He couldn't stand to see another Microsoft cash-backed ninja slash-and-action game bask in even a measly morsel of leftover spotlight. Back then, I loved Ninja Blade. I found it breezy at the right times and challenging at the right times. I liked its combat and its scale. I didn't mind its QTEs. In fact, I loved the way the game blended QTEs and QTE-like mid-encounter obstacle traversal to liven up the risk-reward balance during boss fights. Ninja Blade stands as a capstone, a graduate thesis of the pre-Souls Microsoft-partnered From Software era that gave us Murakumo, Metal Wolf Chaos, and most notably, Otogi 1 and 2. From Software at this time honed their game design sensibility into a perfect alchemical blend of old-school Famicom hard-actioner and Hollywood-friendly polish. Ninja Blade occurs to me today as Ninja Gaiden the movie, the video game, a stride toward the movie, the video gamification of video games' Naughty Dog future. Wow, maybe Demon's Souls represents Dragon Quest, the movie, the video game. Can't believe I never thought of this before. Ninja Blade scored 4 straight 8s from Famitsu and a 6.5 from IGN. Whatever the case, glimpse here in this absolute example of a J8, the last shriek of multiple fading eras. Which GamePro gave a perfect score, by the way. I left that part out because it didn't support my thesis, though now I feel bad for leaving it out. Number 8. Banjo HD. Missile Fury. Developed by Treasure. Published by D3 Publisher. Released on May 4th, 2011. I have so much to say about Banjo in general and Banjo HD Missile Fury for Xbox Live Arcade in specific that I have to quote Wikipedia just to calm myself down. It says here Banjo HD Missile Fury sold 12,923 copies. I wish we had such specific numbers for everything. It fits Banjo's joie de vivre to have such a granular sales number publicly visible. It also says Game Informer declared, Banjo superfans have a lot to chew on here. Did they mean that as an insult? Maybe they did, because IGN called it confusing and hectic, more so than other Treasure shooters. Eurogamer took the mask clean off and described a mean, almost contemptuous difficulty curve. Okay, I have calmed myself down. As recently as... intentionally left blank. October of 2024, I have witnessed communities of persons debating the best Banjo. These conversations have, since the your times, revolved around the specific scoring system allowances made or not between the otherwise identical Nintendo 64 and Dreamcast versions of the original Banjo. I say politely, as a middle-aging man who owns 2 bespoke suits, move on, my children. Of all treasures, ancient treasures, Banjo alone broke free of its origins. I don't mean to say I don't love Gunstar superheroes or Sin and Punishment 2. I do. I merely mean to say Spirits and Missile Fury evince that Banjo lit 1,000 unextinguishable fires in every treasure employee's heart. Minutes after opening the custom level editor of Banjo Spirits on Nintendo DS, my friend and I made a level that caused the DS to turn off. Banjo HD Missile Fury puts that psychosphere on your big old television. Today, I acknowledge it as the best Banjo, and maybe even the best treasure game. They should consider incessantly re-releasing this instead of Ikaruga. Number 7. Concept Saga, developed by Omiasoft and Jamsworks, published by Namco Bandai Games, released on November 22nd, 2006. Unless you count the time in 2014 a woman I matched with on Tinder offered to quote-unquote teach me how to play Magic the Gathering, I've never had much entertainment interest in collectible trading card games. I have had professional curiosity, of course. Anyone with experience as a game designer can't deny the brilliance required to come up with such an idea as Magic the Gathering, much less balance it more than a little bit well. I just so can't get into the paraphernalia aspect of it. That when collectible card analogies appear as the backbones of JRPG battle systems, I tune out. Somehow, none of this deterred me from enjoying Omiasoft's Concept on Sega Saturn and Concept Second on Sega Dreamcast, and eventually going completely wild for the Microsoft Xbox 360 exclusive Concept Saga. To finally enjoy building a deck of cards with which to engage in rigid-ruled conflicts, I needed both a single-player game with a role-playing wrapper that denecessitated like-minded real friends by providing me enthusiastic adversarial fake friends, and a nice childhood-evoking dice game structure. Concept Saga presents as Magic the Gathering Itadaki Street, Mario Party for people who think Yu-Gi-Oh! Seems cool, Monopoly for Fire Emblem fans, the game of life with a horse gambling edge, Pachisi with randomness multipliers, and the Digimon equivalent of a Pokemon trading card game branded Candyland, in which the rules happen over and over until you have said, well, okay, enough times to enter a permanent flow state. Critics complained of the average 4-hour match length. You just couldn't make a game long or short enough for a circa 2008 video game critic. These days, where I see the great designer Sam Barlow frequently tweet about Shiden the Wanderer, I feel that a young indie developer who checks out Concept Saga has a hot chance at going Balatro viral. Number 6. Bullet Witch, developed by Cavia, published by AQ Interactive, released on July 27th, 2006. Most of Bullet Witch sucks. By most of it, I mean one of its 6 levels. Anyone who has played it knows which level. That level sucks so much that it feels like most of the game. You can't like that level. You can like a lot of stuff in this world, in this life, though you can't like that. Pick something else. Yet here I am, a uniformed charter member of the cult of myself. 18 years ago, I stepped right into a pile of liking this game. I had hitched myself to Cavia's wagon early, with the phenomenal Ghost in the Shell standalone complex for PlayStation 2. I rode that rodeo bull through Drakengard and Drakengard 2. And on Thursday, July 27th, 2006, I, as an unofficial Winback 2 Project Poseidon spokesperson, celebrated like a religious holiday the occasion that Cavia had 2 new games out. Zapan XOR and Bullet Witch, both for the Xbox 360. Zapan saw Cavia shackled to someone else's property, though Bullet Witch, thanks to AQ Interactive's blessing, saw Cavia launching an original franchise. After chiefing Zapan Night 1, I dove into Bullet Witch Night 2. I laughed loudly at its cutscene dialogue. I luxuriated in the spatial continuity virtuosity of its opening stage. I had Blockbuster Video discovered a never-unearthed early 1990s anime VHS tape that just so happened to take the form of a semi-broken Natsume NES game transmogrified into a 3D third-person shooter running in brilliant 720p at a rock fluid 12 to 23 FPS. I realized my tastemaker's curse when I demonstrated the game to a visiting acquaintance who still pontificates about it today. I have infected my corner of the world with Bullet Witch appreciationitis. Though said acquaintance did pass my suggestion about the menu clunkiness surrounding the exciting telekinesis power to the Western publishers, who fixed it. Number 5. Ninja Gaiden 2. Developed by Team Ninja, published by Microsoft Game Studios, released on June 3rd, 2008. Yes, I centered my entry on Ninja Blade around the stupid anecdote wherein Tomonobu Itagaki made fun of it for having QTEs. In that entry, I called Itagaki's Ninja Gaiden 2 Microsoft cash-backed Ninja Slashin' Haction, which honestly I didn't even have to read out loud to know I'd struck Texas T. Now, allow me to reverse Itagaki's heel turn. You have perhaps unknowingly drank gallons of Drano in your lifetime if you look at Ninja Gaiden 2 on the Xbox 360 and think it doesn't own. We as complex humans can push for re-evaluation of From Software's last non-Souls game by bemoaning its at-the-time unfair comparisons to Ninja Gaiden 2, while also pushing for the re-evaluation of Ninja Gaiden 2 among people who knee-jerk reactionally call Ninja Gaiden Black the best one. You don't have to say that if you haven't played it. I've played Ninja Gaiden Black, and I absolutely love it. But let's all turn toward Ninja Gaiden 2. I confess, I used to give up on IRL skill acquisition the instant I encountered a major challenge. If I came back to master a skill later, it always required me to feel defeated, sometimes for several years. Not so with Ninja Gaiden 2. I loved failing and retrying. Itagaki had spoken some truth in posturing jerkishly about his game's manlification powers. I dare say that this here game involving a female protagonist with each boobie a little bit bigger than 2 of her head and 2 short hair, eerily close to the color of her skin, earns its overindulgences by laser focusing them all on meaning something in context. For example, we do not have time to explain the dismemberment system. Bathe yourself in the blood of a game that cares exactly one molecule's breadth less than too much about feeling good. Number 4. Steins Gate, developed by 5PB and Nitro Plus and published by 5PB. Released on October 15th, 2009. I probably cannot speak adequately about Steins Gate today without your iPhone sending you a noise warning notification. Let me try anyway. I have played a great many visual novels over here alone on the other side of the portal through which I pass selected fragments of my opinion toward you. Steins Gate, I freely admit, blew my mind more than a couple of times. Have I, since playing Steins Gate, encountered visual novels more appealing to my sense of taste and style and narrative pacing? Sure. However, let us reflect for a moment. If you have never played Steins Gate, try this experiment at home. Tell a person that you intend to play Steins Gate. If the person replies by beginning to list 200 much better visual novels that you should play instead of Steins Gate, that person has put at least 100 hours into Steins Gate. Thus and so, Steins Gate has assumed a sort of Xenogearsian status amongst its peers and players. I pose a lot and earnedly as a lifelong reader of many books, and today I confess I count select visual and sound novels among those books. I do not discriminate by media format. I cannot ignore Steins Gate as a work of popular literature or hard science fiction any more than I cannot ignore it as an essential time travel story or a video game any more than I cannot ignore it as an essential Xbox 360 game. It may have spawned a manga and an anime and hyperbolically 96 more video games, though it started on Xbox 360, playing willingly to a blissfully small, all-Japanese audience. As a standalone game, I consider Steins Gate its own Undertale, its own Nier, and I can say no more without starting to sound like I have heard of Homestuck. Number 3! Nier, Gross Old Man Edition, developed by Cavia, published by Square Enix, released on April 22nd, 2010. I typed these words on November 15th, 2021. Today, Microsoft released Cavia's original Nier for Xbox 360 via their Xbox backward compatibility program. I purchased it just minutes ago. I freely confess I have not played it yet. However, I promise to place it at third place on my list of 36 essential Xbox 360 games, whether I play it or not at any point in the next 3 years before recording this voiceover, because I know in my soul Nier exists as a game for me. Seriously, I cannot overstate my Cavia appreciation. For example, I know off the top of my head that Beat Down Fists of Vengeance runs at 60 frames per second. It really doesn't have to. Does it look like a game that runs at 60 frames per second? I never played Nier because my life broke itself 3 months to the day after I bought it brand new as a younger, prettier man. It fell off the to-do list for a day that became a decade. Thanks to Xbox Series X frame rate boost, the original Nier now runs at 60 frames per second, making the Xbox 360 version canonically the real one. If you don't consider this adequate qualification as an exclusive, hear this. Though in the West, both the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 versions of Nier featured a gross old man father protagonist, in Japan, the PlayStation 3 starred a younger, prettier brother boy. This makes the father version Xbox 360 exclusive in Japan, the game's country of development. That qualifies it for me. And before you judge me for placing a game I might not have even played this high on my list. Consider that a man my age by now knows himself and his fate, and also that only chumps whine about numbers. Number 2 and number 1. Number 2, Blue Dragon, developed by Mistwalker and Outrun, published by Microsoft Game Studios, released on December 7th, 2006. And number 1, Lost Odyssey, developed by Mistwalker and Feel Plus, published by Microsoft Game Studios on December 6th, 2007. On 2 Thursdays, 364 days apart, Microsoft and Mistwalker released 2 games representing the crystalline essence of the full spectrum of joyful qualities of Hironobu Sakaguchi's life's work. Unacquainted players possessing an Xbox 360, Xbox One, or Xbox Series X console can easily and affordably digitally purchase these games, or find cheap discs somewhere and find within them rustic and ancient delights. Both games present the player generously lengthy single-player games, role-playing games, full of dramatic plot twists and shocking character developments expressed during lavish cutscenes, traversal across vast landscapes, and classic, wisely refined turn-based battles in the largely real-time aspect-lacking style of Final Fantasy X, to the tune of Apex-grade Nobuo Uematsu musical scores. As much as they resemble one another in mechanics and structure, they differ in tone. Blue Dragon gives you a whimsical 16-bit Final Fantasy, populated with young teen characters, breezy in pace and constantly snowballing into a bigger and bigger story. Lost Odyssey gives you the platonic ideal 32 or 128-bit Final Fantasy, serious and lore-steeped, dwelling on grown-up themes witnessed from the point of view of a 1,000-year-old man losing his earliest memories. With Microsoft's secret saintly bagman's cash delivery, Hironobu Sakaguchi went all the way to Moneytown. He commissioned hottest manga artist ever Akira Dragon Ball Dragon Quest Toriyama to design the characters for Blue Dragon, and best manga artist ever Takehiko Slam Dunk Vagabond Inoue to design the characters for Lost Odyssey. Nobuo Uematsu, perhaps also via the Big Check's blessing, after years of composing pumpin' Final Fantasy boss music directly inspired by the rock band Deep Purple, commissioned literally Deep Purple frontman Ian Gillan to perform lead vocals on Blue Dragon's boss theme. Sakaguchi, meanwhile, consulted best-selling, prize-winning novelist Kiyoshi Shigematsu on Lost Odyssey's more literary themes, and commissioned dozens of fragmentary short stories from Shigematsu to scatter throughout the game as readable memory snippets. Critics called Blue Dragon's story childish and battles too easy. Microsoft might have ramped up Lost Odyssey's combat difficulty in response. Critics liked Lost Odyssey more, though maybe because it looked more like a Final Fantasy. Even Akira Toriyama fans called his, in hindsight, excellently restrained Blue Dragon character designs boring. Critics, meanwhile, referred to Kiyoshi Shigematsu's literary pop-ins as visual novel segments, which indicates how few critics at that time had ever actually played a visual novel. Not all words you read off a screen meet the classification of visual novel. I don't call my email inbox a visual novel. At the time, I called Blue Dragon a bottomless bowl of Cap'n Crunch on an endless Saturday morning, and I still stand by that. Yet all around me, even then, I felt the world turning on the Japanese role-playing game. Delirious critics cut Blue Dragon no slack. They visited upon its head punishment for every not exactly Grand Theft Auto aspect of its genre throughout history. I watched with an awed curiosity not exactly similar to grave offense as it dawned on me that my personal favorite genre of video game had fallen off the wagon of success. The critical establishment had moved past random turn-based battles and sweeping slow-paced epic stories. They only liked the ones that pioneered novel new presentation methods. They needed a bigger talking point, like Final Fantasy VII's CG cutscenes, to like a new-to-them franchise in a new-to-them genre. 9 years post-Final Fantasy VII, the mainstream critical establishment didn't know how to react anymore to a JRPG some corpo monsters had under strict advisement by mystery creatives thrown big money at. Even more so because it didn't have a number in its name. And yeah, I admit, Blue Dragon did look pretty dinky too, for example, Halo or Gears of War. Fans. I think it has aged well. So let's leave that out of it and move on. Critics liked Lost Odyssey more, though by this point I saw the JRPG genre as fully hanging out to dry. Critics liked Lost Odyssey because it visually looked slightly more like the serious games winning awards. It dressed the part, so it got just enough courtesy applause, yet it quickly fell off the table. Nearly every Final Fantasy fan I recommended it to back then told me they had decided to buy a PlayStation 3 so they could play Final Fantasy XIII. They all chose to follow a brand name rather than a creator. Most of these people that I knew didn't even like Final Fantasy XII or even play Final Fantasy XI. And they definitely all disliked Final Fantasy XIII once they played it, despite buying a console just for it. And for this reason alone, I put Lost Odyssey at the top of this list. Also because I happen to genuinely like it a lot. Today, at its slowest moments, I consider Lost Odyssey the Final Fantasy equivalent of a hypothetical Wegmans store brand Cap'n Crunch. And at its best, at its most of it, I consider Lost Odyssey Final Fantasy with a Michelin star. Because you see, not everybody wants to eat something that has a Michelin star. Even if they don't care so much either way for the version of the thing that doesn't have a Michelin star. Here in 2024, big-time JRPG heads generally regard Lost Odyssey as a great example of the genre and a fine game. Some consider it a masterpiece. Many report that they never got into it. Yet from my critical point of view, it, like Blue Dragon, exemplifies the kind of joyful, generous, momentousness-bursting video games that really dragged me into this hobby long ago. Recently, revisiting it revealed to me acres of wisdom in its craft. For those 364 days between my paying full price for Blue Dragon and my paying full price for Lost Odyssey, I looked forward to a hopeful future where video game publishers kept treating wise, experienced creators with respect. I also looked forward to several more Mistwalker games and maybe a couple Blue Dragon sequels. Today, we commonly know of the Japanese phenomenon of the oidashibeya, or the ousting room. Long an urban legend, somewhat recently confirmed mainstream style to exist in reality, and a company sends employees to the sometimes windowless oidashibeya when they want them to quit. They do this because they do not want to pay the employee severance. Maybe the employee did something wrong. Maybe this employee has just gotten old. In the oidashibeya, employers cold bully employees with boring tasks until the employees agree to leave. Rumors long tell of Hironobu Sakaguchi's exile to such a room at Squaresoft after he spent a little too much money making the major motion picture Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within. When eventually he left and formed his own company, he must have done so feeling full of life and hope for his Microsoft future. Little did he realize the Xbox 360 represented a philosophical oidashibeya, an oidashi bako, one with windows looking out on a nice skyline. At this notion, and this notion, perhaps best and nebulously, represents the way I feel about this era of the let's get you to bedification of our legendary game designers. Microsoft money-bagged national treasurely experts, and then let the world softly whisper, "Okay, please stop, though," at them. I can't pretend everyone should love Lost Odyssey and Blue Dragon. I don't even recommend them to most people. Some people, most of all rushed, underpaid video game reviewers for strict deadline-having mainstream video game websites circa 2007, just don't have the attention span or time for a 50-hour adventure. Though I can full-faithedly argue that in these two games, we got the last exact instances of the Super Famicom Japanese role-playing game, a perfect speed course in that whole era and style of video game for anyone who only has the time on hand to play exactly 100 hours of JRPGs. Critics, players, and publishers together conspired to let this fade away. Too bad Sakaguchi and Co. hadn't had the foresight to invent HD 2D. The original Japanese release of Lost Odyssey used fancy Japanese calligraphy paper for its case sleeve, clearly because the makers loved this game. When Microsoft launched the backward compatibility program, they gave away Lost Odyssey for free because Xbox honcho Phil Spencer said he loved Lost Odyssey. Yet this love declaration in hindsight rings gong hollow to my ears. Bigwigs get high hog on fume-huffing the glory of legacy games like Lost Odyssey because literally no one alive on Earth right now is willing to do this anymore at all. A Niagara Falls cascade of increasingly self-importance-focused business decisions has checkmated this possibility into a floating point error. In conclusion, the Xbox 360 had some cool video games, and most importantly, video games had some cool video games, and most of the time these days they don't anymore, on consoles at least. So in honor of the Xbox marketing team and their erstwhile backroom moneybags, be sure to play Game of the Year 2024 contender Metaphor ReFantazio, aka the most Xbox 360 Japanese developer original IP launch window energy-having game of the past decade. So how did I do? Did I forget any games? Sound off in the comments, which I promise not to read because actually I didn't forget any games. I definitely remembered the Kinect and tried to worm a great joke about Don Matrick in there, though my strict adherence to word counts didn't let me. I also had a great idea to put Cameo Elements of Power at number 4 right under Nier. I intended to pretend I considered it some kind of perfect overlooked masterpiece worthy of reevaluation. Then I thought, hey, why not, Ricky J-inspired tone aside, make this thing 100% sincere? So I did that instead. And yes, if I had included Cameo, I also intended to put Hexic HD in the top 10. Look, this hillbilly blood don't wash out of a man's brain easy. My 23andMe lists like 4.7% gremlin, with a question mark after it for a pretty medical reason. And I need you to know that Fable 2 definitely came in at number 37. So let's not worry about that too much. At the risk of further alienating the 9 remaining persistent listeners, let me make a few recommendations. First, you can subscribe to this show if you want, though only on your podcast platform of choice. However, do not ever expect another episode anything like this one ever again. You can also back this show on Patreon if you want. However, please realize that your doing so has zero bearing on another episode anything like this ever existing again. Quite frankly, I think if this episode inspires you to back somebody on Patreon, you should back me on Patreon. I specifically reject any payment from Insert Credits Patreon for the semi-legal related purpose of my not sounding exactly like a psycho when I say, for example, that you could back me if you liked this. I have also, for the record, never advertised my Patreon even once on this show. So let's do it. You may find it at patreon.com/actionbutton. Over there, I take months and even years deeply researching granular aspects of my videos. I haven't released a video in a while, though if you believe another happens eventually, well, I suppose I must go now, as I have chosen to perform this recording here on camera such that if I understood the word count and my speaking pace correctly, it ends at exactly 6 p.m. on Friday, October 18th, 2024, and therefore, now I must stream live exclusively on the Action Button Goblin Bunker Network, accessible only at twitch.tv/actionbutton. In closing, discord.gg/actionbutton. Tim Rogers signing off. Smoke a good one tonight.